study session agenda for December 12th, 2022. Here we are at the council chambers on 111 East Maple. So the first item on the agenda is refuge collection recommendations.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The council's had a lot of discussion over the years and certainly lately about beautification of our city, how to deal with issues of litter, trash, etc. One of the ideas that city staff has looked at in the past and would like to bring forward again for your consideration is how trash service is handled in our community. So tonight, our Municipal Services Director, Lisa Reynolds, is going to give you an overview of kind of what our current lay of the land is, and then some proposed ideas, and hopefully get some direction from you about where you might like to see us go next steps on this item. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Good evening, Council. As said, I'm Lisa Reynolds, Municipal Services Director. I just want to start by thanking you for giving me the opportunity to tell people all day that I was going to come talk trash to the council. Appreciate that.
Did you enjoy that?
I did.
Good.
I don't get to say it very often, so. Basically, I just wanted to kind of start the discussion by looking at where we are currently. Independence obviously does not require trash service for residential customers. We currently have 6 private hauling companies that are legally operating in town, and there are also 2 other haulers. One is currently has an expired business license. Community Development is working to get them back into conformance. And then there's a hauler also operating in small parts of town that has not been approved by council to be operating. And Community Development Business Licensing continues to try and work to get that under control as well. So 8 total doing business in town, 6 of them currently licensed. Recycling is not any kind of required option, neither is yard waste, not required in any way by ordinance, and not required by any state statute either. Bulky item pickup is required by our city ordinance, but it's only required once a year, and that is kind of a schedule as you see fit with your hauler for that one time a year that the hauler is required to provide it. So no coordination citywide, no coordination even within an HOA. And then the price for basic service through town currently ranges anywhere from $20 to $35 a month per household, depending on if you have recycling services, if you're part of an HOA that has a contract for the entire subdivision or something like that.
Mr. Mayor, we ask questions as we go, or do you want?
Whatever you
So
prefer.
just a question on the bulky item pickup, that's required of trash haulers once a year as part of their service, or is that like an extra fee?
It's supposed to be required, just that they have to require it, but they can charge a fee for it.
Okay, thank you.
And Meg, I broke something. It's not moving. See, I got it up here, but what I break? Okay. So the thing everyone always asks, at least me, is how do we compare to our peer communities? So this is a list from Mid-America Regional Council, provided by one of the solid waste committees. And you can see that overwhelmingly we are in the minority when it comes to requiring trash service compared to peer communities. There are only 4 communities listed on here as knows where trash service is provided, but I just want to note that that's not necessarily they don't require it of their residents. It's just that they don't in any way facilitate it. For instance, the city of Blue Springs does by ordinance require trash service, but they don't facilitate how that's carried out. Lee Summit has it in their ordinance to require it if they choose. A lot of Lee Summit is handled by the active HOAs that contract for the entire subdivisions there. Grandview and Raytown don't have a requirement and don't facilitate it. And then a couple of other things to note. You can see there's some wild variation here on if bulky item contract is required, or if yard waste is required, but across the board, everyone requires recycling. Curbside recycling is part of their contracts. And then the other thing that I think is interesting to note is the price per residence. All of them considerably lower than our average cost per residence in Independence. And I broke it again. I'm just not allowed to touch this, apparently.
While Meg is
We
coming,
might as well just sit
will you be,
Lisa.
will you be sending this to us, Lisa?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Basically, the problem with our current situation is that it challenges several of the strategic objectives that have been set forth by council and things that staff are seeking to improve as well. Everyone is concerned with visual appearance of the city and the perception of public safety and public health. Everyone is concerned with improving customer service and our public infrastructure and controlling long-term cost, financial sustainability. Across the board, these are objectives that all of us are, vested in working on. Problem is that all the trash in town and our current situation kind of flies in the face of several of those objectives. So when you talk about improving visual appearance, obviously you can drive through most of town and find illegal dumping, litter, pretty much anywhere. You can see on this table that trash violations are actually the #1 code issue. This is the last 4 years, but it's actually the last several years running, and you can see that percentage is just escalating as we go. This is not only expensive, and it's also time consuming. No, really. It hates me. Yeah, that's good. It has a negative impact on perception of health and public safety, but also just between community development and municipal services. The last fiscal year, the city spent over $300,000 on trash cleanup, trash abatements, staff time associated, and then us disposing of the things that we picked up. In addition to that $300,000, that's hundreds up to thousands of staff time hours that have gone to picking up illegally dumped trash rather than doing the core functions of the people in those departments. So when people in streets are out picking up things that have been dumped in the roadway, they're not patching potholes, they're not paving, they're not working on overlay and things like that. For more visual, this is a pretty typical, this is actually a repeat offender. 2 of the pictures in this are one location and another is, both of these are repeat offender addresses for us. They're full trash bags. We have the mail, we have everything, addresses, where it came from. We don't actually see them dump it, so hard to push it any further without seeing it happen. But they are absolutely full households worth of trash. On to improving customer service. Business licensing and community development receives a lot of complaints about quality of the trash hauler service. As long as those businesses are maintaining the minimum requirements to maintain their business license, there's not a whole lot the city can do at this point. We're not administering that contract. We don't facilitate it in any way. So it's really just up to the customer to deal with the hauler on their own. If the city were to contract for large areas of town with those haulers, obviously then we can work on standardization of services, consistency of services, and work to enhance that coordination between the haulers and the residents. As far as improving public infrastructure and facilities and controlling long-term costs, trash trucks are heavy. I know that's really an obvious thing, but nobody really thinks about how that compares to regular traffic on our streets. I'm sure several of you, where you live is like mine, you'll see multiple haulers, trash trucks, multiple days in your subdivision where you live. I know if you are on my street on any Tuesday or Thursday, you can see as many as 4 different haulers go up and down the street. There's just no coordination. Bear with me while I geek out a tiny bit on you, but there is actually an organization that has done an equivalent comparison to equate a trash truck to a number of regular passenger vehicles. And so that's AASHTO, if you hear me speaking in alphabet soup, but it's the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, and they have deemed that one trash truck is equivalent to 1,400 regular single axle or single passenger vehicles. One trash truck, 1,400 trips in a car. So with that frequency of multiple trash trucks on your street, that can be up to 4,200 to 5,600 extra vehicle trips just in a week. So obviously that does have an impact on our streets. There's an additional study, if you really want to geek out sometime, and you can check into the University of Michigan's study on the stopping and starting of trash trucks on roads, and they talk about how that pushes the pavement out and causes severe rutting over time. If that could just be streamlined and controlled to one hauler, fewer passes along each street, then that would save our streets quite a bit. And I'm sure you guys are quite aware that street maintenance topped our last customer satisfaction survey right up there with public safety. So it's absolutely an issue that we need to address. So the big question is it time for a change? Is it time to maybe look at something else? If we looked at requiring residential trash service, we could reduce trash around town, increase customer service responses because we would be coordinating with the haulers and our residents would not have to do that themselves. Reduce wear and tear on the roads, reduce the cost to residents because again, our residents are currently paying $20 to $35 for same services across the board. The average actually only $16. And most of them in that get yard waste, recycling, and bulky item pickup for that money. So our residents are paying more than maybe they could if we were to consolidate services. And increase the efficiency and lower the cost for the haulers. If they're making less trips all the way across town, they're not necessarily decreasing their business, but it's consolidated to a specific area of town. They have fewer operational costs too, so that helps in passing along those savings. And they maybe get economies of scale in picking up some extra customers in a certain part of town. So there are gains for them as well as for the residents. So we've talked about a couple options over time. I say option one is a single hauler. Option one really would be for the city to maybe get into the trash business. I personally cannot stand here and recommend that to you. It's a very capital intensive thing to get started in our resource strapped environment. I just don't have any ability to make, in good faith, recommend that. We could look at a single hauler system. It's an option. It would be the cheapest option for our residents because obviously one company gets all the business. They're guaranteed that income, that revenue, and they're guaranteed to collect it because the recommendation, no matter which way we go, would be to add this to the utility bill like all the other cities have done. And so it's just as if it's another utility. So there's the ability to do shutoffs and things like that. It's all just coordinated. So they collect their revenues and we have a better, cleaner city. The drawbacks of the single hauler option is that it does really limit who can bid. TEDS possibly can't necessarily service the entire city. I don't know that we want to look at intentionally trying to run people out. So our recommendation currently would be to go to a multiple hauler option, which would basically just mean divide the city into hauling zones. That could be 2, that could be 6, that could be, whatever. And obviously this is a conversation that will spur many more going forward if we decide to go down this road. And that's one of the things we'll need to decide. But that would be our recommendation. Divide the city into hauling zones. That lets all of the current haulers potentially bid on a zone or as many zones as they would like. What we would do conceptually would be to average those bid prices together so every resident paid the same, no matter which hauler they were using. Drawback, it would be probably a couple dollars a month more than maybe the single hauler option for the residents, but again, still a savings over what we're doing today. And then, of course, anytime you have more contracts and more vendors to deal with, there's more administrative burden there. But I think we're already dealing with those haulers from a business licensing perspective, so I don't see that as too problematic. One thing we would need to look at doing would probably be to hire a solid waste coordinator to oversee the program. Our recommendation would be to have an administrative fee, small, and by small I mean like $1 or less added to the cost to fund that position so that there would be no additional cost to the general fund. And then anything left from that administrative fee, whatever it was deemed to be, could either potentially provide additional funding down the road for any dumping that were to occur later. It could possibly provide base funds for a program for elderly or low income. There's lots of options, and again, a bigger conversation if we decide to go down this road. But the biggest thing there would be a position dedicated to dealing with the haulers and administering this contract, and no cost to the general fund. So as we decide if we're going to go down this road, there's still obviously lots of things to consider. We do have low-income homes that we would need to discuss, people that are elderly or have mobility issues, low-volume households, and then HOAs that already have service. How do we handle that? So issues to consider. Our next steps, I think this is a conversation that has been had. Zach's mentioned several times that this has almost been talked to death. So kind of we're at a point where it's just, let's decide to go forward or let's never speak of it again. But just make that decision. Is it something we want to pursue? If so, then we obviously need to start several conversations with the community, with the haulers to get input from them. One of the big things is that by state regulation, we have to give haulers 2 years notice. The only exception to that would be if we choose to contract with all of them. So if we want to set up a contract with all 6 that are currently working in Independence, we can do that, and we can do that at any time. If we're not going to contract with all of them, then we need to give them 2 years notice, and that can be done tomorrow. It's just sending a letter to all the haulers saying, hey, we're looking at this with intent to issue an RFQ at some point. But lots of conversations to be had, again, primarily with the haulers and our residents. But with that, I would just see if you have any questions.
Any questions?
Okay.
Fire away.
So first question would be, is there any evidence, do we have any, actual evidence that having a ordinance that requires trash, service would actually reduce the the trash in the community? Is there any studies or anything out there like that?
While you answer that, will you share your experience at the drop-off depots? And
Sure. Well, drop-off depots are often used, especially now that the rates have gone up. They're commonly used by people that don't have service, and they stockpile their trash for the entire month or over the winter and wait until we start having them again in the spring. So again, if you can imagine the health concerns that could come along with just having that volume of trash in your home for that long a period of time, but they do use the depot as an alternative trash service. As far as studies specific to Independence, we've never required it, so I don't have any hard numbers to say yes or no. You can look visually at the communities that do require it and say, and again, that's always subject to where you are in that town, because there's always problems everywhere, right? But by and large, most of those communities, you don't see quite the same things that you see here. We could certainly ask for code violation information from other cities and see if trash is still their #1 issue. Would probably be the easiest quick answer to that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Have you given thought as to how would the billing still work through the individual, companies, or, would it be, something that we would take over?
So
or
our
what?
recommendation would be to facilitate the billing. And that, again, reason for that coordinator position. But we've talked with water to see if it would be possible just to add it as a line item on a utility bill. That's possible with our existing system. The vast majority of other peer communities, that's what they do. Every year, I have to make a call to all those communities to update sewer rates. And as part of that, they always have to back out the trash fee because it's just part of their utility bill overall.
Okay.
And that would be our recommendation, just for ease of collection more than anything.
Okay, okay. And would, in your mind, would we consider, requiring the various haulers to offer, a yard waste program, a recycle program? Would those be part of the whole deal? Would that be where you pay extra for that if you want it? They provide the container, we provide, the individual. What's your thoughts?
If I had my personal preference would be absolutely yard waste, recycling, and bulky item pickup would be a requirement. In the communities that have bulky item pickup, some of it is some of it's biweekly, some of it's monthly, some of it's annually, semi-annually. I mean, it runs the gambit, and we can decide down the road how we want to handle that. But I think absolutely all three of those things should be part of the contract that we would ultimately put out.
Okay, all right. I think that's all I have at the moment.
Anyone else?
Very good. Thank you very much.
So in terms of, Mr. City Manager, in terms of if you're looking for direction, I'm in favor of proceeding down this road, at least exploring it more. I can't speak for my colleagues, but it just, to me, makes a lot of sense from a standpoint of trying to clean up the city, of having less traffic on our streets. In my particular subdivision, 4 days a week, there are trash trucks running through there, generally multiple trucks, because they're providing different services. And so I'm in favor of us continue to explore this and see how it might actually work out.
Thank you. I would recommend, and this is what I'll work with our staff toward. On that next steps slide, Lisa had mentioned having a resolution directing us to pursue that solid waste program. We can work to get that added for that first council meeting in January, which will be the 3rd because of the holiday. That would give us the backing of council direction to go work on this issue, allocate staff time for that purpose. I know in my conversation with Councilmember McCandless this morning on this issue, it was very important for her that there be solid communication strategy laid out. So we can start putting some work together on that too, about the different groups, et cetera, that as part of this we would need to engage. But that would give us kind of the push off of shore to go work on this and at least start framing up the issue for further council consideration.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, proceed.
Well, I can't hear you very well at all.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Just want to let the council and Mr. Walker know that I am firmly in favor of taking some action on this issue. I understand that changing or consolidating trash companies or changing routes or changing people's trash companies, I understand that's a very personal subject, and we need to be thoughtful about that and take some time to consider it. I'm sure my council members agree, fellow council members agree. I think one thing we could think about doing sooner than later, however, would be just, and maybe this was already said by Councilmember Fears, but just mandating trash service for everybody inside the city. In other words, property owners, I think, should be responsible for providing trash service at their properties, even for folks that rent or lease out their properties. I think the owners should be responsible for making sure their properties have trash service. I think that would be a really good first step that shouldn't cause too much heartburn. I don't know if too many people, so many of our citizens and residents are very responsible folks that take good care of their properties, and this is important to them. And I think everybody should contribute. And if they can't do it on their own, we should help them. So that's my take on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Proceed.
so I might be in favor of an ordinance requiring trash service, but I think that's as far as I would personally take it, because I like my trash hauler. I don't want the city regulating to tell me who I need to choose or who I need to have. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on? Okay. That'll bring us to the second agenda item, rules of recommendations. Is that correct? And could we do this, my friend? Could we take about a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back and get you started on that one? Thank you, sir. So if I'm correct, you've got a bit of a PowerPoint for our rules of procedures. And if I'm correct, Councilmember Fierce did a lot of work on this. The two of you worked together quite a bit, is that right?
Yes, sir. Good evening. My name is Zach Walker, City Manager, and you are correct. Going to share some information on your rules of procedure this evening. something that the council's been talking about for quite a while now, and something that I've invested quite a bit of time with great assistance from Councilmember Fierce to help us get this pulled together. So just generally, what I wanted to talk to all of you tonight about is why I think it might be important to do a comprehensive update of the rules of procedure, give a little bit of a conversation about some of the things that we are proposing in the draft that the council member and I have worked on, and then some proposed next steps for that as well. So just as a reminder about your rules of procedure, those are based in City Charter Section 2.16, which allows the council to adopt and determine its own rules of procedure. The very first council rules of procedure were adopted way back in September of 1964. Since that time, those have been adopted 26 times. But what I found kind of remarkable is that has been 7 times in the last 5 years, most recently 2 months ago in October of this year. City staff went and looked at some of your peer cities here in the metro, Blue Springs, Raytown and Grandview, Lee Summit, and Kansas City. We gathered up all of their rules of procedure and took our own, things that we knew were working well for us, but also took things we thought might be a betterment of the practices that we have right now, and have included those in here. Started very broad, and Councilmember Fierce sort of helped us filter that down a little bit, and then we felt it was ready for the body as a whole to look at. So again, our hope to be kind of get some feedback before potentially putting this on an agenda for an update. One of the reasons we think it's important to do a comprehensive update, again, 7 times in the last 5 years, sort of highlights that there's a desire to change. And so rather than continuing to have this piecemeal approach, this would lock us in to more comprehensive reform that hopefully would provide some stability and permanency for a longer period of time. Okay, so now I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the key changes. Of course, this is not comprehensive, but these are some of the items that I think are most important for the council to be aware of. First and foremost, inserting the rules of procedure into city code. There is a section 1.01 in the city code right now that contemplates that a city council will exist, but it is a very small section. Again, the council rules of procedure have been adopted and amended by resolution over the years. I can't say that that is the most easily findable document out there, whereas if it were in city code, that is on our website, you can pull that up, you can search for council rules of procedure, and it would take you right to that section of city code. So I know transparency is very important to the governing body, and this would certainly heighten that. One of the other changes that we placed in here addressed one of your more recent changes, and that is regarding when a regular meeting is held the night before an election. So right now the council changed those rules that if there is to be an election the Tuesday after a council meeting, we would instead move that meeting to a Wednesday. In discussing that provision with the body, it sounds like the primary intent with that was to deviate away from some potential electioneering issues the night before a local council election. So this removes references to state or federal elections and would only kick in this Wednesday provision in the event that we were having a local municipal election here. One of the more substantial changes in the proposed rules of procedure would be regarding the order of your regular meeting agenda. And right off the bat, it is proposed to remove prayer from opening of the meeting. I did go visit my grandmother yesterday and asked her for forgiveness for taking prayers out of meetings. But we do strive here, I know as a body and as a community, to be welcoming and inclusive of all. And right now, our prayers are very oriented toward the Christian faith, which I know can be somewhat uncomfortable for those of Jewish or Hindu or Muslim faith. or no faith. But there's also some very extreme and real examples out there. More and more, the Supreme Court has ruled that if you create an opportunity for one, as a public body, you have to provide that opportunity for all. And there is probably one of the more famous examples out there, a group known as the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. They wear colanders on their heads so that the spaghetti monster won't get them. They love to come to public meetings and pray and practice their Pastafarianism religion, ending with ramen at the end of their prayer. So if you're interested in having that group up here praying for you, you might continue what you're doing, but otherwise, this would just take that out and sort of avoid some of that potentially contentious issue down the road. We also added a section of providing council member comments immediately after citizen comments. So you'll see here in a minute, we still contemplate the end of your meeting where a lot of thoughts are shared, but this would provide some interaction between you and a citizen. If a citizen came up here and addressed you, I think sometimes they're left feeling like, were my thoughts heard, or was there a conclusion to that? And this would allow you to dialogue back and forth and close loop on that. We've tried to better define what is meant by a consent agenda item, a non-ordinance action item, and ordinances. Consent agenda items in your rules of procedure would be defined as things that are issuing a contract or a purchase order or very routine business. Non-ordinance action items are those that don't require an ordinance because they're not changing city code, but they are certainly going to be debatable or somewhat contentious. And then ordinances, of course, are things that require two readings as this code defines and would be amending either the budget or the city code of ordinances. As I mentioned, we'd still have the council roundtable or council member comments at the end of the meeting. But then we thought it might be helpful to also add a staff portion if we needed to seek guidance, like for example on tonight. Maybe we would provide you a very quick update on the trash hauler issue and get some quick input and feedback from the council on that item. So that would provide, in a public setting, a way to seek feedback or guidance or update the council on some emerging issues or items. Okay, more key changes regarding the agenda. And this was, again, taking our peer cities around us and the way they're handling some of their things. So general business items such as contracts or things that have gone through the Planning Commission, those would be directly added to an agenda. Other items would be approved by the mayor to go on the agenda or at the request of, the common practice has been 2 council members, so that's, we mimic that same practice there. As you know, we've changed your rules of procedure to require that we get our agenda out the Friday before the next Monday council meeting. In order to help us with that, we would ask that all council requested items be submitted on or before 9 a.m. 2 Thursdays before, so those items could be properly routed and prepared so that the city clerk can get the agenda out in conformance with your new rules of procedure there. I've had asked of me, and I think when that change was made, it was you, Councilmember Stewart, that asked, what if something came up of an emerging nature before the next meeting, but the agenda had closed? We found that other cities have contemplated for this by allowing staff to seek an item to be added to the agenda if 2/3 of the council members agree to it. It seems like a common example might be items like, for example, related to debt service or a bond issuance. So we would come to council and say, the market is very favorable right now. This is the right time to go to market to seek to refinance this bond. We didn't know that when we made this agenda 2 weeks ago. Can we get 2/3 of you to allow this item to be added to the agenda so we can capture the economies in the marketplace right now? That might be an example of something related to that. We added language regarding video conferencing. When the rules of procedure were adopted in 1964, that technology was not available yet. A lot of our peer cities in updating their rules of procedure have added language about how video conferencing will work, the do's and don'ts, also specifically contemplating citizens or applicants to the Planning Commission or those wishing to participate in a public hearing, rules around how that will all work. So better define and provide for the virtual format that exists to us now. We also added some language regarding meeting conduct. One, a lot of cities have moved away from allowing phones or computers to be used for non-business purposes in the meeting so that people are engaged and focused on the meeting, but also potentially avoiding a sunshine law issue if people are communicating about the meeting electronically between one another. It takes away that potential hazard. We also talked about, and you just saw this put in practice a minute ago, but asking members to stay present and engaged in the conversation unless a recess is called, and if somebody has stepped out, that votes not be taken during their absence. One of the things that we noticed is in our proposed rules of procedure, is that if you have a conflict of interest as a council member, you could be allowed to step out so that you're not, seen as participating in the debate or voting on the item. But otherwise, this is about professionalization of the process and having the council all here as a body. There adds a pretty lengthy section about the rules of order, implements Robert's Rules of Order directly into the council rules of procedure again. So you as elected officials and citizens can all see what the different motions are and how they work and the order of motions. It's known to everybody. There are no surprises or parliamentary games being played. It's all there. One of the things I would highlight, because it's a little bit of a deviation from our past practice, requiring a majority vote to direct the city manager in the form of a motion. So again, this helps you function as a body, which the charter intends for you to do, rather than any one member trying to provide direction. Personally, I've never experienced that in a nefarious way, but this again is all about professionalization of the group, and this helps us do that and function in the way I believe the charter intends for you to. The rules of
Mr.
procedure.
City Manager, if I can just interrupt just
Yeah,
real quickly.
please.
Can we go back to recusals just for a second?
Yes, sir.
And I'm trying to think of, so members can recuse themselves. They can actually make a statement, and they can actually leave the room and not vote.
That's correct.
And it says in the minutes that we've got here, the city council shall have an option to abstain from a vote due to conflict, but shall recuse prior to the item being talked about. If the member of the council did not recuse themselves prior to the agenda item and participated in the discussion and abstains from voting from the item, the city attorney would advise the member that abstaining is not an option for them at this time. If the member continues to abstain or refuses to vote, the city clerk would record the vote as an aye vote or a yay vote and note that in the journal the member refused to vote. Was it the practice of other cities to go ahead and record that as a yes vote if they, because clearly you've got a member who's on the body, they've got a conflict, it's been brought to the attention of the body, and they continue to go ahead and vote anyway, and then if they refuse to vote, it's recorded as a yes vote, which might in fact be what they wanted to have happen in the first place. So that might be something that we have to discuss a little bit in greater detail.
Yeah.
I don't know if other cities saw that. Do you remember what Lee Summit or Blue Springs did in that regard?
Lee Summit so this was their language
Okay.
on this, but again, we could have more conversation with them specifically about why they've adopted that practice. We felt like as staff something needed to be contemplated. There's been sort of two issues that we've seen that we think would merit cleaning up. One is when people participate in the discussion, but then at the very end say, "Oh, I can't vote, I have a conflict of interest." That's not congruent with the spirit of abstention. The other issue is when somebody abstains but has not provided reasoning why, that kind of goes against that transparency issue that I know is important to the council. So being on the record as to why one is abstaining from the issue it seems to be a common practice, but that's definitely one we can flag and have more discussion about.
Yep. Did you, Councilman Ferris, you worked on this quite a bit. Do you have any thoughts on that, or should we talk about it offline?
Well, yeah, I think you raised a good point, and, you know, I'm certainly comfortable. So let me just make a general comment. While I did work with the city manager on this and reviewed it in great detail, you know, I'm not necessarily advocating for any specific changes. I'm just, you know, I was just more of a sounding board, you know, than anything else. And so I'm open to any discussions, any changes that if we have specific changes that the council wants to make, then, you know, I'll weigh in on those individual specific changes. This is just, you know, I mean, there's some in here I'm not overly comfortable with. Like I personally hate to see the prayer leave from the front of the agenda, but I do understand why that recommendation is being made, and while I don't really like to see that, I also see that it could potentially cause difficulty and problems, and so that is a reason for not continuing that practice. So I don't have any specific, you know, concern with that particular one, and yet, but I do see your point. So
Okay.
I think it'd be interesting to know what if Lee Summit has had any problems or issues with that. So,
Yeah,
for example.
that's one we'll flag, and that's, again, this is great. That's why we wanted to bring this here. We felt like it was ready to have some discussion for you all to poke holes in, and that's one we'll flag and follow up on. Next key change that I would highlight for you is the creation, or maybe even say addition of, some standing council committees. Council already has the Audit and Finance Committee, so this would just codify the existence of that group. We believe it would be helpful to have a legislative and intergovernmental relations committee, and I'll give you a couple of examples why. Throughout the course of the legislative session that's about to be upon us, the State General Assembly convening from January to May, there's a lot of times that legislation, as you know, Mayor, will come up very quickly, amendments to bills, et cetera, and the local legislative delegation is calling and asking us, what's your position on this? It's not always items that we've already formally brought to the body for you to make a decision about what your position is. So convening a group that is authorized by the council to make quick policy decisions on some of those things would position us better to be responsive as legislation moves and flows through the legislative process in Jefferson City. Intergovernmental relations, I think you all know there's a lot more coordination with our regional peers here, particularly in Eastern Jackson County, our Shared Services Initiative, where we're working with the 4 other communities here in Eastern Jackson County. Having somebody that is designated as the representatives of the council to participate in some of those discussions. More and more we're being asked to send 3 or 4 representatives from the city to different groups. Having that designated group that would be the standing representatives of the council would be quite helpful. We thought it would be helpful for you all to have a rules committee, again, to occasionally review rules of procedure or other emerging issues like that and be able to make recommendations on behalf of the council. I did not have this drafted in the attachment for your item tonight. However, as I contemplated this more, I added this to the PowerPoint. I think it would be helpful for you to formally stand up Employee Advisory Committee. You're going to see later on, and I think this is one specifically, Councilmember Fears, that you did work on, with some language relating to employees of the City Council. And so again, to have a designated group that can handle some of those issues that we'll talk about here in a minute on behalf of the council might be advantageous for all of you. But with those committees, it would be the responsibility of the mayor to designate a chair and vice chair and at least one alternate and one permanent standing member to that. We proposed a council code of conduct in here. Now, this is different than the work that the Mayor's Ethics Commission is working on right now. That group's looking at things like gifts and honorariums and term limits and campaign finance and all manner of things. This is more about how council members comport themselves, both here in official city business as well as offline. So there's some specific language in there about council and staff relations, and you may remember Joe Lauber here a few weeks ago speaking about the role of council. This would kind of standardize that. Why is that important? You know, believe it or not, these meetings do get watched, and the behavior that occurs in here is noted. And so when there is somebody looking to consider bringing a business to Independence or doing business with the city, if they get a sense that this is a less than professional entity, that could be a tipping factor in where they choose to locate or to do business. So it's important how we engage in here, and having that professional relationship with one another is in the city's best interest. We added language in here about the council and public relations. So again, both formally as a body in here, you know, stating that you're going to follow state law and code of ordinances and all of that, but also just some language about how you comport yourself offline, making sure that you don't make representations on behalf of the city that you're not maybe authorized to make. So if you were going to speak at a public hearing and the council hasn't taken a position on something, you know, noting that, yes, I'm a council member in Independence, but I'm speaking as an individual tonight. This is my opinion. Segregating that is important, and this would create that. And then also has language in there about how you'll conduct yourself with your colleagues here on the council, with other public entities and agencies, and also with the media. Okay, and then finally, but still very important, our proposed changes contemplate adding a section regarding the relationship between the council and the council's direct hires, which are the city manager, the city clerk, the management analyst. Those three are established by city charter. City charter also says other such positions as created by the council. There is an executive assistant to the mayor right now, and then an executive assistant to the city council, so 5 in total right now. This adds very specific language about how recruitment will be handled, states that that will be run through human resources as with any other position that's being hired in the city. They'll assist the council in posting the position and reviewing resumes and helping you set up interviews, et cetera. It defines that the appointment process will happen by city council resolution, so that there is a record of employee being hired. Does state, and I believe this is very important, performance reviews will happen no less than annually for all of these employees, and that termination will also happen by resolution. It does state in there that all of those activities I just mentioned will happen in executive session, so that matters of personnel can be treated with the dignity that they deserve and not, you know, laid bare here in the public realm. So final slide here for you tonight. We've already started this process, but getting any feedback on the proposed changes, that doesn't all have to happen tonight. There's a lot of information, but as you're reading this and you start to see things or you have strong feelings, we would like to know that so we could modify this document appropriately. An advanced timeline, and we can always slow this down, but an advanced timeline would be to have this docketed for first reading at the January 3rd meeting and a second reading and a vote for January 17th. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I will conclude my remarks.
So January 3rd meeting is a Tuesday because Monday is celebration of the New Year's holiday?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Any comments, questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Proceed.
Zach, I'm sorry, Mr. City Manager, one of the first thing you said you would you want to put it in code. What do you mean by that?
So right now, there is a resolution, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's a resolution creating the council rules of procedure. I'm able to find that because I email the city clerk and pester her, and she sends it to me. What I'm proposing is actually adopting it into the city's code of ordinances, in that section 1 that has just some very brief language about there being a city council. This would insert that into the city's code of ordinances.
So if you're talking ordinances, you're talking like a violation, city ordinance if something were violated.
You can buy, yeah, yes, I mean, let
So
me
it
be
could
careful how I
technically
say
be
it.
charged.
Pardon?
It could be charged in municipal court, is that what, I mean?
No,
No.
so there are sections of city code that provide, I mean, they're regulations, they're guidelines, but for which there are not a penalty section. So you'll notice, I didn't add a penalty section in here, because I didn't feel like that was appropriate. These are more guidelines of how the council is going to behave and comport itself, but really, as you know, the council is the enforcer and administrator of its rules. It would not be, in my opinion, professional to have a penalty section associated with your rules of procedure.
I would hope not, okay. And there was another part in there about how any additional items are added.
Yeah.
It said it would take 2 council members or the mayor. So does that mean the mayor can just add one? Or would he have to have another council member as well?
The way that's written, it would give the mayor that authority. And again, that is the way some other cities have had that the manager will go and review the agenda with the mayor, and the mayor will determine if it's, that issue's ready or ripe to come before the council.
Well, I would object to that. I mean, I kind of object to the entire thing. But if the mayor wants to put something on there, he needs to get a council member to go along with him. And when you say it takes 2 council members, so for instance, last week I asked you in a meeting to put something on the agenda. Would I need another council member to like co-sponsor that, or could they just say, hey, go, yes, I agree to put it on there?
I would see 2 ways for that to happen as this is written. One would be, yes, you have another council member say, yeah, we want to put this forward for the body to consider, or just as you did last week, asking for that, then the group here could say, well, we agree with that. We would like to add that to the agenda for consideration.
And then one other thing, you mentioned it took a vote to give you direction in a city council meeting. What direction? Like, can you give me an example?
Mr. City Manager, go prepare an ordinance for me that requires trash service. And that's one council member saying that. And there may be 6 others up there that are like, I think mandatory trash service is dumb as rocks. I don't want him spending any time working on that. So it would avoid going down a road that the rest of the body, if thinking of yourself as a body, it would prevent, one member from deviating from what the group as a whole is comfortable with.
Well, I object to that as well. I would be, no. I mean, that takes away our right as a legislator. I would wholeheartedly object to that.
If I can interject, Councilmember.
Sure.
I can understand your perspective, but we also operate as a body, and we're one of 7. And so if we all individually direct the city manager to do things, that really breaks up our responsibilities as a body to speak with one voice on issues of policy. And organizations that I've worked with, because I work with, financial institutions, they have board meetings, and where they get into trouble is when one individual pushes an agenda item and it's not accepted by the other folks on the agenda. I mean, it's not accepted by the other members on their board. And I think it's the same thing here. We should have it where, if it's an item that is of that importance that we need to drive it, then it would require, 4 people to bring it up and bring it forward.
But aren't we contradicting ourselves? Because you just said it takes 2 to co-sponsor something. And now you're saying it takes.
That would be if, and I have some concern about that too. I might, might require it to be four people to vote to bring it forward to move the item.
So what are we talking about? Add anything to the agenda requires 2 council members. What items are we referring to there compared to a vote of the council to direct you to do something?
Right. I think you bring up a great point.
Yeah, I think maybe finding more consistency across that, so that that's a uniform approach is probably advisable as we're sitting here talking about it.
I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, no, it's understandable, but I would, if I had my druthers, I would ask the city manager to, when we bring back the draft, to withdraw that motion. It has to be four votes of the council to bring an item to the agenda.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
Proceed.
I'm just thinking out loud here, and that is that, 4 votes to bring something on the agenda. Now that isn't necessarily the same as having 4 votes to pass something.
Right, because you could
say
vote to
bring it to the agenda,
Right.
but then vote it down. But it doesn't. Seems to me like it's kind of overkill to have 4 votes just to bring it to the agenda. Maybe 3 could bring it to the agenda, and then the whole body can make a decision. But I'm just thinking out loud here. So I think maybe a little more thought in that regard might be worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so. And I want to be very cautious. This is not, about me, but this is about making good use of the council's time, the things you want me as your employee to be working on. I've had circumstances where an elected official calls me and says, write this ordinance for me. And you'll spend a lot of time researching what's been done on a past issue, what's other best practices from other cities, and 2 days later you get a phone call, I changed my mind, I don't want to work on that. Well, I mean, that's kind of where it's better to know this is something the body wants me, or at least enough of the body wants me to be spending my time and my staff's time working on, that you're not creating a potential conflict between the council, because some of you wonder why I'm working on it and others of you are wholeheartedly behind it.
And I agree with that philosophy completely. I think your time and the city staff's time and the city staff resources should be driven by a majority of the council and not by 1 or 2 council members that drive it. So I would ask that we, withdraw that section about the 2 votes, and that, it has to be brought up here, and then we could actually vote on it during council member comments. If they wanted to bring something up, we typically don't vote there, but, But I just think it's important that we as a council speak with one voice, and the way that you speak with one voice is majority rules.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
there are, I respect my fellow council member, certainly, and I can appreciate that, his position that as a council member, he has the right to assert any ordinance he would like. However, there are few, if any, other functional governmental bodies where that's the rule. You served in Jeff City, and you did not get to simply say, today, I drafted this bill and it will be read and voted on. And the reason for that is exactly what you just stated, because there is value in discussing ideas and policies with your fellow council members, with your fellow legislators. And if we are not interested in doing that, then we are simply using that privilege. And I've seen it done many times over the last couple of years, and before that even, many times before that, we see this privilege abused. And there is, in no world is it appropriate to bring back the same resolution 4 council meetings in a row because you're trying to make a point. In no world is it okay to, aggressively attack positions using an ordinance or a resolution on the consent agenda. It is time. We owe this to the people of the City of Independence. They have demanded a change in the way that we operate, the way that we act, and the way that we treat each other. I can very much appreciate that, and I'm ready for that. So I am looking forward to more collegial rules. I'm looking forward to more discussion, and we should be setting the standard for the rest of our neighbors, not playing catch up. So I'm ready to make these changes. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Proceed.
so I agree with the way the state runs because there's a ton of representatives, there's a whole bunch of senators. So if each one just brought something forward, it would just take forever. Okay, there's 7 of us. And the only thing this is doing, it's taking our ability to represent the people that elected us. That's all it's for, and that's all it's being done for. Thank you.
I see it as an opportunity for you to sell the idea to 3 other council members and get it in front of us. I think we as an elected body owe it to the citizens that we are talking about issues that are more important than just one individual council member bringing the idea forward. We're a collective body. We're not individuals. We're one of 7, but in order to get something passed and brought to the agenda, I think it, just like in Jeff City, you've got to take it to a committee. You've got to get a majority of that committee to do it. There's one time I saw somebody who brought an amendment, got it on the floor, got it passed, and it was incredibly egregious because it had not gone through the process. It had not been vetted. It had not been through a committee. It had not gone through a legal review. It had not gone to the people who were opposed to this idea, and all of a sudden it became state law because a representative got his colleagues to go along with it, and they shouldn't have. And I just think we need guardrails in order to do the job effectively. So would I like to bring up anything to this body, and would I like to direct Mr. Walker to do things that I like to have him do? Yes. Is that fair to the rest of you? No, it's not. We need to collectively do things as a body. And when you have 4 votes and you say, as a body, this is what we agree to, this is the policy, I think that's important. But I can respectfully disagree, and you and I can, there's many things that you and I agree on. Maybe we disagree on this one, but anything else, or, okay. Anybody else? Other thoughts, comments? But yeah, that'd be the only change that I would make is in order to bring it up, it would need 4. I know they gave you some heartburn. If you want to make it 3 as a body, I'm fine with that.
Well, I'm just thinking about this particular item that we're discussing. At least 3 of us discussed the need for some, kind of overall changes, and asked the city manager to, go out and do some investigation to see what other communities did. And so, now at that time there were only 6 of us, so that was a little bit different scenario. But it's not unreasonable. I think 3 might be if you could get if you garner three people to agree that something's at least worth discussing, then I think that's not bad. But that's just my off the cuff thought. I think I'd like to think about it a little bit longer. But
okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further discussion, nothing else on the agenda, we'll call it adjourned. Thank you all.